Hi everyone and welcome back. So in the last video we talked about database module and the config module. In this database module we are using type ORM module and we wrote the config module, which is populating the configurations in the process.env. I mean, these are like the database module and the config module, the major building blocks. And after that I did some changes in this auth GraphQL file. Like we have only two queries, login and the refresh token. Login is giving the login result, and this is our user GraphQL file where we have a queries and mutation. So what I will do is I will create a domain module, and inside that I will put the user module and auth module inside it. So we have user service, user module, and the auth module. We have a user resolver, user module, user service, and like controllers is replaced with the resolver when we talk about nestjs GraphQL, right? And we just have a bare bones structure where in the service we are injecting the type ORM repository, and here is our simple user service, auth service, user service. In auth service we are injecting the user service, config service, and JWT service. We will just fix these imports so we can just get started with writing the further code. So what we are going to do, we are just going to write a simple login and the sign up APIs. This is the domain module. Inside domain module we are going to import everything like auth module, config module, logger module, database module. So this is our domain module. Here we are initializing the database module and doing GraphQL module.for root, and we will just update the app module, just a simple empty structure. It will be importing a domain module. So app module is importing domain module is importing app module, and auth module and the user module. So this is a simple our app module that we are sending for the bootstrap. We can also pass config module, or config module is fine, and we can just remove the unused imports. So this is our domain module. Inside domain module we are importing database module, passing the user entity, config module, and the logger module, and we'll fix the imports. Okay, so this is pretty much. Here we are doing GraphQL module.for root. This we have already written in the earlier video. These are the definition it is going to generate when you start the application, and we have only one user entity. So this user entity, and we are importing the user module, auth module, logger module, config module, and the database module inside it. So domain module is like a root module for us. That is the final main module that we are passing inside app module. Okay, now what we can do is we can understand this GraphQL module.for root. What it is doing, we are doing a dynamic initialization of a GraphQL module.for root. Now we'll start adding the query and the mutations. So we already have a schema files created in the type definitions, and this is the important part. Here we are using Apollo Federation driver because we are going to pass this subgraph to the Apollo GraphQL gateway, and that is going to compose the schema definitions exposed from this interface. Now we can just see what APIs we need to write, a login and the refresh token. So this is how we write the query. Here we'll just change this login to the refresh token. There are two queries, login and the refresh token, and this is how we are passing the arguments using args, and these arguments are same what we have defined inside a auth.types.graphql file. Okay, so I mean we just leave this empty structure. Here we just put a refresh token, and this API will, what it will do is refresh token query is just going to check if user already logged in, and it will just generate a new token and give you back. It's not taking any argument as an input, so we are just leaving the body as empty. We will take care of this later. In the login, so you can see we are taking a login user input, same we are defining here. So you need to be aware about how we are passing these inputs. It should be the same whatever you are defined inside a type.graphql file. And here we just put a try catch wrapper that if anything goes wrong we just throw the error, or you can just do a logging. It's not about just an empty try catch. You can just put some logging to check what is the error code you received. And here we are calling auth service dot method, which is defined inside auth service, validate user by password, and if we got the result we will return it. Otherwise we didn't get the result, so we will just throw authentication error. This is coming from the Apollo Express GraphQL, not able to log in, maybe user email ID, password, whatever, credentials are wrong. Okay, otherwise return the result. This method we can define inside our auth service. Auth service is already having all the dependencies initialized. It is taking it is going to return promise of user entity. Okay, sorry, login result. Login result is what? User object and the token. Now we are getting the input. First of all, you can also do some logging because we already have a logger module. So you can say this.logger.info, and we can print the whole payload, whatever we are receiving in the body, using json.stringify. So let's first take a input. This login data input we are getting, login user input, and we can just say is login data, or okay, this takes a string as an argument, so we can just say json.stringify and login data. Now it's all about authentication mechanism, login. So you are passing a login, email, and a password. First of all, we may need to validate, okay, if these both the properties are being passed or not. So we will do all those things. Let's say you are passing email. We can also do the validation if this email is being passed. So user service.find one by email. You are passing login data.email. So first of all, we need to check if this email exists in the database. If yes, then we will match the password using bcrypt. So here in the user service, we will define this method find one by email, and this await this dot user repo dot find where email equal to this, find one where email equal to this, a simple typo rm query, and we need to return it. It may return null, or it can return the user object. So if it is not null, we will proceed further. So user object, this is fine. If user is null, that means we can throw authentication error, unauthorized error, or this authentication error we can use here, provided by GraphQL. Please provide a valid email because this email doesn't exist in database. So after doing this, if till now we are good, that means email exists in the database, and then we can start looking for the password match. So initialized with password match false, and we are going to use a bcrypt. So let's put it the try catch here, and here we can just say is match equal to await this dot compare password. We are going to write another method in the same class where we are going to pass both the password values. First of all, let's define the compare password. It's a private async method. Compare password, and what compare password does is it takes two inputs, the entered password or the database password. Database password is a second argument, and then we can do is return bcrypt.compare, await bcrypt.compare, and we can just pass both the arguments. It is going to return a boolean, and bcrypt you need to import everything as a bcrypt from bcrypt. That's good. Okay, compare password, we need to pass two arguments here. One is the entered password and the database password. I mean, the value is inside a database. If is match is true, that means we got the match. We can also do a lot of other validations, like, okay, first of all, the email and password, both the properties has been entered. For that, we can just use, because the only thing is here we don't have validation pipe, same as the nestjs REST API controller, but we can still create a DTO classes, and we can write a class validator dot validate method. So here export class user auth, and here we can have both the properties, which is username, sorry, email and password, and use this class validator annotations like is email, is defined, is string. This is for email and password. Now you can just create the instance of user auth, set both the properties, const user equal to new user auth, and then user dot email equal to the payload user dot email. Let's change the variable because user and user both are conflicting. So here let's change it to the user auth dot email, user auth dot password, and user dot password. Okay, now in the class validator, how we can validate, that we can see in the documentation also. Here we created a classes and we set both these properties there. So class validator nestjs, here we just create a simple class, and then you can set both the properties, and then there is a validate method provided by class validator. this we can just simply explore like this. So there is a validate method, validate object, and then it returns an error object. So we can just copy and paste it, and we will just do the validation in the same way. Validate we will get from class validator, and here we are passing user auth object. If errors are there, right, that means we are done. We can just throw a bad request exception if error.length is greater than 0. Otherwise we are good. We can proceed with the, here we don't need to check now user has email or not, because yes, it has it, because we are doing validation. And now here we can just generate a token. If there is a match found, create token, and we pass the user object. Create token is just another method which is just using JWT nestjs module, jwt.sign, and you just pass the payload. Okay, this login result is returning two things, user and token. So user is user object and token. So this is what we are returning. So we can now define this create token method. Create token method takes a user as a payload, so we need to construct the payload. We can also add the expiry of the token. If the match doesn't found, we can just throw a authentication error, and then we can just add this create token method, private async create token. I'm just using my snippet, and here we are just creating JWT payload which contains email, user ID, permissions and all. Okay, username is required, so we'll just add the username optional, and here we are doing JWT service.sign. This is how we are signing a token. We may need an expiry, or expiry we can get from the environment variable, or we will use just this nestjs JWT module. In the module initialization we can pass what is the token secret and what is the expiry. Both of these things we can pass over there only. So we can just remove this code from here. We will just do it while initializing the nestjs JWT module. It is taking secret and private key, and this is sign in option. We need to pass expire in, so it depends on you how you want to pass it. JWT.sign, and here inside an object you can pass the expire in property. 15 minutes, you can hard code it, you can get it from the configuration. What is the expire in property? So here we are getting the expire in property already there. We can use it, or we can just pass it in the root module. But in the module initialization, what will be the default expiry of the token? Okay, so this is how we are creating a simple create JWT, and this is a simple login mechanism. Right, this is a simple login. User will enter the email and password, and we are just returning a login result. Now we can talk about a user resolver. So inside a user resolver we are defining all these methods. So get all user, what it will do is it is just you returning a type ORM where clause, empty where clause, find all. So it will give you all the users. So in the from the schema definition we can understand what all queries, what all mutations we need to write for the users. So first is a user, and then forget password. So this is a users, then user, and then forget password. Here it is user by ID, get user by ID. So we need to take arguments as an input, and that is a resolver. So here ID is an input for the another second query, line number 5. We are passing ID. So here this is a forget password. We need to copy the same value, forget password, for the query, and here we need to pass the ID. So it's like an argument of ID which is of type string, ID of type string, and then argument you can import, and you can pass the get user by ID. This method you can create inside a user service. It's just a simple where clause we need to add, where ID equal to this ID string, and just pass the ID. It's like a find one, and it is going to return a single user object. Forget password is another method. Forget password means you are not logged in and you send this request. So what we will do is we will just generate a forget password token, and we just send you some link on the email. This is how it works. So it takes an email as an input. You will say, I forgot the password. What it happens is it gives you some link on your email. When you click onto the link, it contains a one-time use of token. So that token we will store in the database also. So let's say you have requested a forget password thing. So what we will do is we are going to write this method inside a service, async forget password, and we are getting the email. So first of all, we'll just generate a random token. First of all, we'll find this email is valid, like the user exists with this email in our system. So we can just use this find one by email. This is going to return a promise of boolean, like if forget password executed successfully. So here first const user equal to this dot user report dot find, or we already have a method find one by email. If yes, if there is no user, that means return false. Otherwise, we will just create a token, some random UUID you can generate, or random characters you can generate through this random bytes module. I mean, from the bcrypt, random bytes, and you just generate a hex value of it, 32 character to hex. And then you just save this token in the database first. So here this token value we are going to store inside a user object, user dot I think user dot reset token, reset user dot okay, await, we forgot there. So here user dot password reset, this is an object we are creating token, and the expiry, we can also create an expiration. Okay, till what expiry this token is valid. Let's say user is coming back after months, then we can check the expiration. If it is still valid, await user dot save, and here we'll write a code to send this token in the email. That's it. That we are not writing right now. We just add a updated add field and we'll just save it. So this is what forget password looks like. Similarly, you can actually write other queries and mutations which we have. Another query we have is a create user that we can define. So create user is all about how we are doing. So now we are adding the mutation, which is create user. And this is the create user taking create user input. So input type is create user input. We need to use the same input type, and these input types are already available from the auto-generated code. Create user input. Here also the same problem. We are not using DTOs and validation pipes, so either you can write as some custom DTO class and then use the class validator to validate the payload coming from the request object. Okay, I'm getting the username, email, first name, last name, password, or whatever the properties you are passing in the signup. And then if not, then you can return the errors. I mean, errors are also, we need to flatten the errors coming from the class validator. So what we will do is, we got this user input, we will call the user service method. So here we got the user input, and we can write a DTO. So this create user input has a username, email, password, and username, email, password. Either we update this schema and then regenerate the type definitions, regenerate this auto-generated class, but that's another time. So it's just an example. You can use whatever you want, username, email, password, and then just write a DTO class, and then just create an instance of it. Here we are getting the username, password, and email, and then we can create a user signup, const user signup equal to new user signup, and then we set all these properties to the user signup object. Dot email equal to email, user signup dot password equal to password, and user signup dot username equal to username. Okay, and then you can just do a validate, same as we have done. Errors equal to await, validate, and just pass this user signup object. If there are errors which has a length greater than 0, that means your validation failed. We need to check if error.length is greater than 0. Then we can just flatten this errors, and we can send a bad request exception to the client. This is a nestjs generated error. And then otherwise return await this dot user service dot create and pass the user input, create user input. Now the user service can just check what is in the payload, and it will create the user. So we will just write the create method inside the user service. So async create, and we are taking the user input, create user input, and then a lot of things we can do is, first of all, we can check if the user already exists in database with the same email, and then we can just return a conflict exception or bad request exception. That is the first thing we will do. And we will just generate the hash value of the password, which is we just do we can use a bcrypt.hash and pass the salt value. So we already have a bcrypt. Here we can just write a private async hash password, and we are passing the input value, so it's going to return bcrypt.hash. Password is an input, string input, and this is how we convert it. Now this is like we just generated the values. Now we can just check saved entity equal to the payload. This is user entity, create user input, and the password, and input, and then first name, last name, email property, or whatever. Because first name, last name we are not passing, so we will skip that. We will just say email equal to lowercase email. This is another property we have in database. Input dot email dot to lowercase. Okay, this is save entity. We can do is, now we got everything what we need. We can just do a try catch and just try to save it. Throw error, and here what we can do is, first of all, we can just check if user already exists. Otherwise, this dot user repo dot save. First of all, find one by email, and here we are passing the input dot lowercase email. If there is a user already exists, then we can return a bad request exception, and we can just say, okay, user already exists, we cannot create this user, otherwise await this dot user repo dot save and pass the user entity, and pass the save entity, and we can just return the created user object. This is a simple sign up and login. We can also add a logger, because we can just check, okay, what is the user has been created, this dot logger dot log, and we can just pass the whole payload as a string. So that will help us to debug things if needed, and we'll just return the user object. That's it. So these both the APIs, login and the sign. Here we are passing the password. Okay, we forgot to override the password value. Whatever coming in the payload, we need to create pass the hash value of the password. So here it comes is how we are. Now there are multiple methods, create user, and this is how we are defining the input and creating the mutation. So there are other methods also available, update user, create user we just only covered. And this is how we are converting the resolver. We are writing a resolver to add the mutations and the queries in it. Okay, so what is the next thing now? We have a login and we have a sign up. So first we will do the demo, and then we will add these JWT strategies and auth guard to, once user logs in, user will get a token. Then how we can protect the other endpoints with that authorization header value, and how we validate the token. If the token is valid, then allow user to access the other admin APIs. Okay, get all user, update password, and all those properties.